This is the last session of the two-day meeting that we have conducted to conclude our project titled South-South Integration and the SDGs, Enhancing Structural Transformation in Key Partner Countries of the Belt and Road Initiatives. Now, one of the key objectives of this project was to create soft linkages amongst the BRI partner countries by sharing their policy experiences on structural transformation. We focused on 3 pilot countries, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka, but we did not limit ourselves to just these 3 countries. We also shared successful policies in other developing countries, including Pakistan, Malaysia, Mozambique, and South Africa. Now, these 2 days meeting provides a snapshot of the project, and we share the key lessons that we have learned in the project over the past 3.5 years on what can help structural transformation in developing countries. Now, one of the most successful example of structural transformation in developing countries has been that of China. And we know China has transformed itself from an agrarian economy to a global manufacturing hub and now to a digital leader. Now, while developing countries cannot replicate China's successful policy experiences, but there are definitely some key lessons that they can learn from this developing countries' structural transformation experience. And then these lessons can be tailored according to the ground realities of developing countries. So this is the objective of the project, and this is what we have shared amongst the developing countries. Now, we examined China's policies in 5 areas, namely macroeconomic and finance, trade, industry, digital economy, and debt sustainability. One area where China has an outstanding success is its policy experience vis-a-vis digital transformation. China has had a very comprehensive policy for putting in place a digital ecosystem which has greatly helped digital startups. And just to give you an example, in 2021, China's tech startups received $132 billion of venture capital, in spite of the regulatory crackdown on big digital platforms. Well, we will hear more about China's policies with respect to its digital startups from our panelists today from China. But apart from China, amongst the developing countries, Indonesia's digital policies have also been exemplary for developing countries. We heard yesterday Mr. Chanuka from Sri Lanka mention that while designing their digital policies, Sri Lanka learned a lot from Indonesia. In this session, we will hear about the policies put in place with respect to digital startups in Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Pakistan, Ethiopia, and China. Now, we are very fortunate that we have with us today His Excellency Fabian Rudyard, Permanent Representative of Indonesia to the UN, the WTO, and other international organizations. Prior to this, His Excellency served as Deputy Minister for Multilateral Cooperation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia. So, Excellency, we are very happy to have you here. And let me invite you to deliver your keynote address. Please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lasmi Banga from DGS ANKTED. Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, let me congratulate you on the launch of the ANKTED study on China's structural transformation. What can developing countries learn? The topic we discuss today, policies to promote digital startup and develop in developing countries, cannot be more relevant than ever. The pandemic has inevitably accelerated our path to digital transformation in numerous facets of our lives. Within the realization, under the presidency of G20 of Indonesia this year, we set the digital transformation as the priority. It is now our collective responsibility to ensure that the policy and regulatory framework can support digital economy to thrive. As one important step for our economy to recover, to contribute to the prosperity of our people. According to ITU's annual overview of the state of digital connectivity in 2021, since 2019 and during the first year of pandemic, developing countries' internet penetration climbed more than 13%. In 46 LDCs, the average increase exceeded 20%. In light of this trend, I'm of the view that there are at least 3 important policies areas for developing countries to focus on, so as to reap the benefit of the digital economy and growth of digital startups as well. First, realizing inclusive digitalization as the key step for digital startups to flourish. In most of the developing countries, if not all, the multiple internet users and young demography are pertinent assets to growth of digital economy. However, we need to address the issue of digital divide that unfortunately still prevail in the countries between urban and rural, different socioeconomic level, as well as between men and women. Digital inclusiveness needs to also reach the SMEs sector, which contributed prolifically to the economy of developing countries. And I believe that digitalization combined with creativity provided by SMEs can serve as a corridor of opportunity to stimulate growth and enhance innovation and harnessing entrepreneurship. In Southeast Asia, for example, by utilizing the internet and creativity, tech startups have proven to be resilient in the face of crisis. Second, investing in human capital. As a source of creativity, innovation, and a stock of knowledge and motivation, human capital is unquestionably an important factor for the digital economy to grow, especially in the digital startup world, where creativity is the only currency. In Indonesia, for example, we have a growing number of startups, reaching close to 2,500, making Indonesia the 5th country with highest number of startups. But this number is in no way guarantee the success and sustainability of the businesses. Human capital investment in digital startup boils down to the incubator development phase, the business matchmaking, access to finance and scaling up. Each step of the way requires investing through entrepreneurial, vocational training, and formal education. And this can be done through a public-private partnership, as well as enhancing collaboration with relevant international organizations, including UNCTAD. There can be a better time for us to fully seize the benefit of digitalization, and investing in human capital is pivotal. Third, providing enabling ecosystem. In addition to ensuring the provision of physical infrastructure, accessibility, and digital skills of our people, we need to ensure a supportive and conducive environment for the digital startup to proliferate. Creating an enabling environment would surely include measures such as promoting policies that foster competition and prevent unfair domination of well-established digital companies, as well as promoting access to finance, PPP, and encouraging multi-stakeholder collaboration to providing training. Through the presidency of G20 of Indonesia in 2022, this year, in collaboration with UNCTAD, we envision a set of guidelines that can help countries in measuring digital skills and digital literacy. This initiative will hopefully ensure that our people are equipped properly to carry out activities to boost the digital economy, and it's also expected to provide more platform for digital entrepreneurs from developed and developing countries to interact and exchange best practices. For example, through tech bootcamps, tech hackathon, dialogue, and etc. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the conduct of this UNCTAD project on the South-South integration and the SDGs this week is another beginning to encourage structural transformation that help foster the digital economy in our respective countries. It is now within our grasp how far we want to go, aiming high and supporting the growth of digital startup by lending our hand to each other, not only in ensuring policy and regulatory framework in place, but also providing practical programs that would provide concrete benefit to the actors of the digital economy. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think very insightful presentation. You talked about the three possible areas which are needed: inclusive digitalization, investing in human capital, and enabling a digital ecosystem. And one thing which I really want to ask you is that how about measuring the digital economy? So does Indonesia also measure the digital economy? Because yesterday we heard Sri Lanka speaking about the importance of measuring digital economy.
Well, thank you so much for this question. In fact, digital economy is just infant industry in Indonesia. So I believe now the government is trying to its best to creating a parameter, working method, how for us to be able to objectively measure the digital economy. Maybe one of my colleagues will be understand. Bu Agustin know more about that. But politically, I think there's a sense of the confession, not only for the government, but for the nation as a whole, that digital economy is a future economy. And I think we should invest as much as possible what we can, capitally, in terms of capital, in terms of human resources, as well as creating ecosystem so that the digital economy can thrive as one of the pillars of our economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Excellency. I think that is excellent. And if with G20 and with UNCTAD, we can also initiate this, the way how to measure digital economy in developing countries, I think it will be very useful for all developing countries over here. So thank you very much, Excellency. We now move to our panel discussion. We are very fortunate to have a very good panel today to discuss policies of digital startups in their countries. We start with Mr. Sachindra Samaratne. He's a director at Information and Communication Technology Agency of Sri Lanka, which is the apex government body mandated with digital transformation of Sri Lanka. And he's also responsible for designing policies for digital startups in Sri Lanka. So please, floor is yours.
Sorry about that. And it's practiced across all the regions of the country. 1/3 of the digital startup ecosystem is outside of Western Province. And before this data came in, everyone in Sri Lanka thought that it's a Western thing, it's a Western province thing, it's a Colombo-based thing. Just like Malaysia would think everything's in KL. It's not. 1/3 of our startup population is dispersed across the country, and right now we have a policy of digital startup hubs, which have been established in all the different provinces. And Chanuka and we are working on special policies for the regions. Special policies for the regions, apart from national level policies which have been laid out. So some of the national level policies which have been laid out across our ecosystem is again data driven, based on the research that we've done with PricewaterhouseCoopers, understanding the challenges that the startups faced. So this particular slide shows 12 categories or 12 buckets of challenges that startups face in the different journey of an entrepreneur lifestyle. Starting from seed funding, going to angel investment, starting from ideation, going to growth stage, what are the different challenges that they face? We realized there were 12 different buckets, 29 different impediments that we have to deal with, working with 14 different government agencies. So this is thinking on the ground. So we have now engaged with all these different government agencies and developing policies to figure out answers and solutions to these questions. So it's coming from the startups, because we are responsible for the startups. Our beneficiaries are the startups. So it's driven by the startups. As one policy, I would mention the domestic preference policy, which was passed by the Ministry of Finance, which gives opportunity for startups established in the Startup SL platform. And that's where the platform comes into play. It gives access, and it gives exclusive access to all government procurements less than 2 million rupees. All government procurements for software development less than 2 million rupees, exclusive access. That's one of those policies which links everything that I've said. Another policy based on the 11th challenge, which startups themselves spoke about, the debt funding, we were able to work with PricewaterhouseCoopers to develop an alternative credit framework. An alternative credit framework which looks at providing loans without need of collateral. And right now, I'm happy to say, we have provided through the banks more than 250 million rupees of loans without the need for collateral for these scale-ups. And so these are some of the successes that we were able to have with these new policies which come in. Something which is on the cards is the digital startup or the digital platform policy framework, which a steering committee has been formed, which has been discussed. There are many discussions on this. Even today with our ambassador, we're discussing about, do we tax them? Do we don't tax them? Do we align with the BEPS framework? Do we align with something else? So that discussion has taken place while the e-commerce market of Sri Lanka is also going. And that's some of the hottest topics in Sri Lankan policy right now. So with that, I think my time is almost up. Would like to say that the approach that Sri Lanka is taking is a data-driven approach. We work with Startup Genome, we work with PwC, we hope to work with many other agencies in the future to think of startups and think of what we support startups through the framework of data, and in order to be able to grow the startup ecosystem to become a conducive environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sachendra. Let me take advantage of my chair, since I was able to ask a question to the ambassador. Very quickly, I want to ask you one question that you talked about. You said that we have digital startup hubs. And could you just elaborate a little bit more on how these hubs have been established?
Sure, Ashmi. Okay, thank you. During 2021, ICTA established the digital economy pillar. With that, a separate SBU called regional clusters was established. With that, we were able to establish groups of startups, freelancers, universities, a small ecosystem in each province of the country. We have currently established in 7 provinces. We have 9 provinces in Sri Lanka, and the 8th province will be established in the next 2 weeks. So these hubs encompass of members of the academic fraternity, the startups, the tech ecosystem, some when it comes to if there are a policy related. So it's a group of people which is established, and right now they are supporting, we have a digital nomad ambassador, which is going around the country promoting digital nomadism. All these startup hubs are supporting him be integrated with the community. And we as an ICTA would one day want to implement all our policies and strategies through these startup hubs without being centralized, to be decentralized.
Thank you very much. What I really liked about your insights, it's quite revealing, is that the organization itself needs a structural transformation to be able to draw policies. I think that is a very important thing, because we set up organizations and we think that they have the expertise to start designing and successfully implementing policies.
Even the mindset change is very important, and I like to see that I brought this in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We now move to our next panelist, Dr. Safdar Sohail. He is the Dean of National Institute of Public Policy and member of Prime Minister's Task Force on IT in Pakistan. So, Dr. Sohail, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Well, our Sri Lankan young colleague has talked about the mindset change as if it happens more with the younger people, which is not necessarily so. Older people do take interest in ICT and try to make ICT an engine of growth, as they say. Start with thanking Rashmi and other organizers for inviting me to talk about this topic, which is very close to my heart. As Rashmi said, I sit on the PM task force, and I have been associated with many initiatives to promote e-governance in the country also. Today we will talk more about startups, but I'll touch on that. And I have been, because this morning we spoke about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, we have a pillar of ICT under China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and I myself actually led the consultations on finalizing the details of the ICT sector cooperation between the two countries. I'll come to that in a minute, but I must start with sharing the basic fact that Pakistan is actually doing pretty well in ICT since quite some time. Not as well as India, but we have learned a lot from Indian experience, and our ICT sector, traditional ICT sector, is more or less on the same structure as India. We've been talking more about ITES, and we have Pakistan Software Export Board, for example. But around 20 years before, government set up other institutions, one for promoting e-office and e-governance in the government. And it's not only digitization of records. Now many provinces have headed towards public service delivery, which is automated, which is interactive. You can even make payments to different government services through automation. So on that front, we have done fairly well. And there, the basic distinction that we keep on reminding the policy makers also, that ICT as an enabler deserves separate attention, and ICT as a sector which has many subsectors needs to be analytically dealt with separately, and then for each subsector, and usually IT, one thing, communication systems and telecom, they all go together. So in that context, we started with public investments in IT around 20 years before. So in that sense, government has been keen. We had an independent Ministry of IT and Telecom now for the last 20 years. So a good focus has been there. Now, briefly about China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the plan which deal with the ICT, the primary feature of that is kind of an autonomy or diversification in terms of connectivity, IT connectivity. Government has been investing a lot on ICT connectivity. We have an independent body for the allocation of spectrums, an independent body for National Telecom Corporation, then National Telecom Inter-Services Board. But the benchmarks that we have given ourselves in China-Pakistan Economic Corridor vis-a-vis China are very challenging. Chinese economy now, the kind of speed with which digital transformation has happened. So I'm glad that in all our interactions we have been having Chinese example as a template, but under China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, there has been an independent fiber optic network which has been established. Data centers are being established. We have the largest cellular operator in Pakistan is a Chinese company. And then in cybersecurity, in developing, modernizing communication systems, television, etc. So that the government is aware that with the help of China, we can develop the connectivity and the infrastructure. And now in the next stage, we are taking ICT as a sector and trying to, you see, we have services chapter in Pakistan-China free trade agreement. So within that framework to have better access to the Chinese market when it comes to the ICT sector. Now coming to the main topic of discussion today, I need not elaborate again the importance of startups, but I would allude only to two aspects at this moment. One is that the way startups, the whole process organized, this is unique that the startups do not socialize their losses. Now, that is why it is so important for the governments as well as for the younger people. Usually when the businesses, particularly SMEs, they start with a very heavy burden of risks on their minds of the failure, but in startups, usually the losses are not socialized. So it is very conducive for innovation, to develop entrepreneurship. And I think it's precisely due to this that we see that once we have the ICT infrastructure in the country, the startups are taking IT solutions to a lot of new sectors very rapidly. And in this context, I think COVID has played a huge role, and there's a big surge in the adoption of IT-based solutions in different sectors, even in agriculture, which would, you see, this is kind of an optimum momentum which has been gained, and with fintech also. So fintech and penetration of IT in almost all the sectors of economy, not only home deliveries and e-commerce, which of course has gotten a lot of boost. In fact, we ourselves did a study on the coping strategies of pandemic. There have been serious socioeconomic impacts. So we discovered that it was not really the emergency relief by the government which helped households cope with the socioeconomic impacts of COVID. It was ICT sector which was very helpful in creating new jobs, in creating alternatives. So that COVID has really brought us to another level, and the government realizing the momentum, and then a large country with more than 60% population below the age of 30, English speaking. We have hundreds of departments of ICT producing 20,000 graduates every year. So there the government came up with Digital Policy 2018, and then Digital Vision in 2019, and Prime Minister himself takes interest in this matter. We have since quite some time National Information Technology Board, and now this is parked at the presidency, like Sri Lanka, where Honorable President himself takes interest. So in that sense, I would say that we have good quality attention by the federal government and as well as provincial governments. It's important to mention the provincial governments because Pakistan is a large country and is a federal structure. All of our provinces have independent IT ministries and IT authorities, and they have their own programs. So if we combine all the funding, public investment of the federal government and the provincial government, this is very significant. Now, our Sri Lankan colleague, the Honorable Investor, has also talked about the digital ecosystem which is there for the startups. So the ecosystem for startups in Pakistan is, one can say, it has 6 pillars. And I'll briefly touch upon each pillar. And it goes without saying that the first pillar has to be the connectivity and the quality of connectivity and penetration of broadband, presence of electricity, which is extremely important. Broadband, now we are going to G5. So that's the backbone which is there. The second pillar, that is funding. Government has announced a plethora of schemes lately for the younger people, interest-free loans. We have research support fund since long, which is a very large fund, and they give hefty sponsorships for research. We have donor-driven programs. Karandas is one program which is being supported by the World Bank also, where the funding is being taken care of. And then we, like our Sri Lankan colleague shared, we also have put in place a system where the collateral is not really required and you can get loan for the digital startups. Now, the third pillar, that is the talent development. So their government has allocated a lot of resources. It's incentivizing universities, and now we have National Vocational and Technical Training Authority, which now has brought international accreditations to ICT graduates, and we have a huge program of DG Skills. These are free courses, and they deliver more than 1 million courses every year. The fourth one, that is the provision of common facilities. Our Sri Lankan colleague talked about the hubs. We use the term of incubation centers more. So we had more of incubation centers in Islamabad since quite some time. But now we are also going regional. And the government is either building dedicated smart buildings or hiring buildings, and they're providing all the facilities with a view to pool the resources and promote research and development and have collaboration and knowledge sharing among the startups which are there. Now, the fifth pillar, which is very important for us, for me personally also, that is the strengthening of interdependencies between the startups and the main ICT traditional sector, which has scale, which is big, which is there for the last 20, 30 years. So to make a mark in the international market, both sectors need each other. Startups need the scale to further grow. So their government has recently announced an ambitious program of allocating rupees 1 billion to introduce a system of apprentices with the scale or with the normal sector. Now, the sixth pillar, which is an important pillar, but I will not go to the detail because I have only 2 minutes to go. That's the regulatory environment. There's a lot of debate that should we light touch this sector or should we have more serious taxation. We have our focus on digital labor and its right. E-commerce, we are taking time in putting in place a proper structure which can do justice to offensive and defensive interests. Data localization is also an issue, cybersecurity too. In all, if I may conclude, I would say that we are doing well, but it could be much better. For example, venture capital is still shying to come to Pakistan due to a variety of reasons. The market opening in China is not coming very quickly. The public service delivery e-governance is doing well, but it can do much more. We yet do not have the sectoral strategies for the acquisition and absorption of energies. And last thing which I would like to say, and which would build on what has been said already in terms of inclusiveness, there I think we need to do much more. And by inclusiveness, I not only mean the rights of digital labor, because there are a lot of women who worked there. One particular area on which when you are thinking of introducing some projects to measure the digital economy, I would suggest that UNCTAD should also measure the digital divide between the persons with disabilities and between the persons, normal, ordinary citizens. Now, that is an extremely important area. And if I may remind you that the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, there are 21 provisions which deal with the reduction of ICT accessibility barriers for the persons with disabilities. But usually national governments do not really bring in this aspect of persons with disabilities in their inclusive policies. And once again, I congratulate you, Rashmi, on this wonderful project. And I hope that we would see many more similar projects in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail, for being so optimistic with respect to all areas and also being able to identify the key challenges. You also found a silver lining in COVID. It led to increase in the operations of digital startups. I think all of us, all our economies, witnessed this positive growth because of the pandemic in digital startups. And we now move to our next panelist, Ms. Esther from Indonesia. She's Program Director of the Institute for Development of Economics and Finance, INDEF. So please, Esther, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rashmi and Excellency, as distinguished participants. Thank you for the great opportunity to be part of this PRI project. This is our pleasure to share the information and knowledge about the Indonesian experience. So this is about how to support digital startup in Indonesia. We divide this presentation slide will be into 4 parts. First is about how are the opportunity and the second about how are challenges for startup in Indonesia and what are the policies promoting digital startups in Indonesia and what are the priority policy taken by Indonesia to support digital startup. Yeah. If we see the opportunity of Indonesian digital economy, we have a abundance of million people who live in Indonesia. Almost 2,070 million people living in Indonesia. And we also have the growing middle class, So the contribute consumption increase almost 12 per year since 2002. And we see that internet penetration has reached almost 76.8% for the first half of 2021. So it means that internet user in Indonesia is about 200 million people. So it means equivalent to 3/4 of total population in Indonesia. As we know that we see that COVID pandemic accelerate digital economy in Indonesia. We see that the growth of electronic money, e-money transaction has increased significantly in 5 years. Yeah, it predicted to reach 18.47 billion US dollar, and it means that it is growing 32% year of year in 2021. And we have a number starts up double during pandemic. We have many unicorn. This is the 7 biggest unicorn in Indonesia. For instance, Gojek, GNT, Tokopedia, Bukalapak, Traveloka, OVO, and GDID. And according to the Ministry of State Secretariat of the Republic of Indonesia, the potential of digital economy in Indonesia is estimated around 146 billion US dollar in 2025. And it means that there is a big opportunity in digital economy in Indonesia. However, we still have challenges in developing startups in Indonesia. For instance, in human resources, and then second in capital, and then third in market, strategy, regulation, and of course the facility. Most of startups in Indonesia get funding from venture capital and angel investor. And most of the important ecosystem should be built by the development of startups in financing. So this is the most important thing, how to develop startups, is getting the funding or enhance the capital. So most of majority startup investor in Indonesia come from abroad. We also see the development of startup in Indonesia requires educated human resource skills. Indonesia is considered quite slow in developing and capturing the growth potential startups. So we need more human resource expertise to develop startups in Indonesia. So we also have many policy support startups in Indonesia. For example, from banking sector, we have the biggest banking sector. For instance, Bank Mandiri, this one of SOE in Indonesia. They have a subsidiary company, and they in fact give a big investment through the PT Mandiri Capital Indonesia as a venture capital company for startup financing. And we also have also developed our digital skills, yeah, by providing vocational training, setting ICT literacy, and then give more expenditure on ICT goods, and provide some ICT trainings for workers and firms. At the local level or professional level, for instance, the Jakarta government or DKI province has introduced a series of incentives enabling SMEs to go digital. For example, they give more fiscal or incentive and non-fiscal incentive to enable SMEs to go digital. And for instance, they reduce their income tax rate, they give relaxation on import facility, and they have improving MSMEs access to financing. And that if I may conclude, we can identify 3 key areas of need to access SME to be digitalized. First, internet access. Second is training, and the third is funding. So we also have support from the penetration of 4G internet. access. So according to the World Bank data, 4G internet penetration in Indonesia almost 54%. So still lagging behind the neighboring ASEAN countries, but we will catch up. We also have identified internet access to be the most important factor to access SME digital transformation. As we see that survey told us that the Indonesian Internet Service Provider Association, so the Java Island accounts 41.7% of total internet user in Indonesia. So it's mainly focused on Java Island. Yeah, that's a pity. However, we still have absence of data privacy protection. This is a challenge here to improve our regulation on data protection to develop our digital economy in Indonesia. And we also have a lack data security policy. So, however, the Indonesian government issued some regulation. For example, Kominfo issued the ministerial regulation number 20 of 2016 about the personal data protection in electronic system, and then it is also implemented in the province of governor regulation number 82 of 2012. So it means that a new data protection regulation covers the classification of personal data and protection of personal data, right of personal data, and etc. So what kind of priority policies that taken by the Indonesian government to support the digital startups then? As I mentioned earlier, that the capital is the most important to develop startups in Indonesia. So we have to provide funding access more to startups if they want to grow up. Yeah, and then second, we need to upgrade our ICT skills. And then third, we have to give more incentive on fiscal or non-fiscal to develop a business on digital. And then fourth, we also have we have to enhance our ICT infrastructure. As we know that now it's only focused on Java Island, not outside Java. We still have a weak signal in outside Java. So we need to improve our digital divide, especially in infrastructure. And fifth, we need to accelerate the personal data protection bill regulation to ensure the security of consumer privacy e-commerce transaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther, for a very comprehensive presentation. I think in the past 3 presentations, many issues are coming up which developing countries will need to now have concrete policies and strategies. I think Dr. Sohail pointed out on digital issues around digital labor, issues around digital taxation. Esther's presentation also pointed out issues around digital payments, issues around data localization and data security. So as we move on to our next presentation, I think we are also collecting more questions and issues for future discussions from these presentations. Now it's time to go virtual. So let me invite Mr. Tige. He is a senior researcher in Policy Studies Institute of Ethiopia. PSI is also one of our partner organizations from Ethiopia who has been working very closely with us in our project. So please, Tige, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Those of you in Geneva. I would have loved to join you in person, but due to extended travels, I wasn't able. But very thankful we are able to connect through digital means. Okay, so I would like to start from my experience in this project. This project has been very unique in the sense that we shared experience among countries which are in sort of similar stage of development, and also similar policies and development orientations. You know, all of them focusing on manufacturing, on labor-intensive manufacturing, on light technology and stuff like that. So this is really relevant and effective experience sharing that we had. Also at individual or researcher level as well, we shared experience with researchers from Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Pakistan, China. So it was really a very valuable experience. So I was involved in the study on Ethiopia's digital economy and the experience from China. However, my talk today will focus on digital startups in Ethiopia, specifically on challenges and recent policies. So right before I go to my talk, I would like to highlight there has been a number of lessons that Ethiopia can learn from the Chinese experience. Especially, I would like to mention among those 8 listed lessons, 3 of them. One key lesson is the need for prudent data management system and data protection, like data localization. This is really key. And also having an enabling regulation for digital investment. Like the Chinese had a very light touch regulation, and then after digital economy really expanded, then they started to be more and more stricter. And the need for strong coordination. So in this, in digital transformation, there is a number of agencies, private sector, NGOs. Even if we take the government side, for example, you have the Ministry of Technology, you have the Ministry of Higher Education, you have the Ministry of Skills and Labor. So there is really a need for effective coordination in this. And finally, I would like to talk about the success in terms of e-commerce in China. And Ethiopia is a very large country. We have about 115 million people with a big domestic market. So the success in e-commerce from China is also is a very positive, experience for Ethiopia. So just directly to the key challenges of digital transformation in Ethiopia. The first one is there's very limited private sector participation in the digital economy. It's a very nascent or new sector. There's also a very high informality, and slow structural transformation, as also my colleague Fireo mentioned, discussed yesterday. There is unreliable electric power and outage, which also affects, digitalization, the digital transformation. Another key challenge is lack of legal framework for private data protection, for cybersecurity, electronic transaction, and stuff like that. So those are either non-existent or very, very newly ratified. So for example, now we have a draft startup proclamation, which we hope will be ratified very soon in a matter of months. Another challenge is the capacity of the education and training system in embedding digital literacy in Ethiopia. So in Ethiopia, we have had a big expansion of training and education, expansion of TVET, higher education, but quality has been a big problem. And this will also affect the quality of, the digital training as well. So there has been a huge expansion in ICT infrastructure in Ethiopia in the last couple of decades, but still Ethiopia remains on the bottom in terms of ICT development index, for example. So access is still a problem. Affordability, it's one of the most expensive to use, internet data in Ethiopia at the moment. We also have restrictive monetary policy. So, for example, FDI is not allowed in finance. So we can't fully reap the benefits from fintech, for example. And also our investment strategy is also a bit restrictive because it has a very high floor for capital requirement for the digital sector, which is above 200,000 USD. But as you know, most startups really require like 50,000 KUSD. So these are the sort of challenges at large, at broad level in digital transformation in Ethiopia. When we go to specifically startups, the challenges for digital startups in Ethiopia. So first of all, startup is now very, very fashionable in Ethiopia, especially among young people, among diasporas. You see lots of diasporas, young people with their laptops, trying to explore opportunities in Ethiopia. But there is, several challenges. The first thing is there is limited financial instruments in Ethiopia. So private equity, venture capital is a very new phenomenon in Ethiopia. So mostly the Ethiopian economy is very bank-based, and also these banks are very, based on large collateral requirements, so not really ideal for startups. So of course, recently there has been some flexibilities, to include movable assets, intellectual property rights, as serving for collateral, but still not ideal for startup. So like I mentioned earlier, there is lack of legal framework for startups in Ethiopia, but hopefully the startup proclamation, will be ratified soon, and then will alleviate some of the challenges. For example, in the traditional way, there is a very lengthy business registration requirement in Ethiopia, which the startup proclamation will shorten, because in the draft, one of the provisions is that there will be pre-registration, which will happen by the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, not the typical Ministry of Trade and Industry. So that hopefully will sort of shorten it. But, we have this successful transport company in Ethiopia. It's a taxi hailing company, right? You might have heard it. It's very successful, but it has to go through a lot of challenges to get where it is now. So I can't call it's a unicorn, but it's kind of a trailblazer in Ethiopia. And also still, as I mentioned earlier, there is lack of regulation for private data protection, cybersecurity, and stuff like that. This will also, definitely slow down the growth of startups unless we, address it in time. And overall, there is low awareness about digital startups, and their unique nature by policymakers, especially at lower level, and also by the general population. As I said earlier, it's very fashionable now to talk about startups in Ethiopia, but it's really around the city of Addis and around young people, around diasporas, and around the educated people. And in general, we have very nascent digital skills, as I mentioned earlier as well. There is limited financial skills about venture and the different financial instruments like venture capital, So these are like specific challenges for startups in Ethiopia. So recent policies that give, hope for startup is, the first one is there is a very high government commitment for digitalization in Ethiopia. You might have heard about the Digital Ethiopia 2025. This is the first comprehensive digital strategy for Ethiopia. So it does not only see ICT, digital sector as an enabling sector, but also as a sector in itself. It also clearly establishes that, the traditional sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, and services to be, to embed digitalization on those. So that is the first, clear, comprehensive digital strategy for Ethiopia, which is, a very positive development in my view. We also have this communication service proclamation of 2019 that really separates, policymaker, the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, regulatory, the Ethiopian Communications Authority, and also operators, Ethio Telecom, and then now we have recently a new entrant, Safaricom Ethiopia, which I hope will reduce the cost of internet. We also have a new directive by the National Bank of Ethiopia that allows, licensing and authorization of electronic payment. So this is also good progress. And as repeatedly mentioned, the new startup business proclamation is the the big one in my view, and it's being drafted. It has been drafted for the last couple of years, but because of COVID and conflict, it's kind of slowed down. But I think now we are on the verge of ratifying it, and once it's ratified, it establishes National Innovation Fund, which to a certain extent will reduce the financial constraint, and also there will be a National Startup Council, which will be chaired by the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, which will be guiding the startup ecosystem in Ethiopia. So overall, we have challenges, but there is huge government commitment. There is very big optimism among startup participants. And hopefully, being a latecomer, we will benefit from the experiences in China, in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, which are relatively, ahead of us. That is my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Tigir. I think it was a very comprehensive, insightful presentation. You talked about the challenges Ethiopia is facing, the regulatory issues, as well as the coordination issues, but also talked about the incentives that the government is giving. We have looked at many incentives, fiscal as well as non-fiscal incentives that have been provided by the governments of Indonesia, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and now Ethiopia. So we now move on to our last panelist, Chozian Wong from China, and I'm sure his presentation will give us a detailed insight onto what kind of policies that China has put in place so that the Chinese digital startups have emerged as unicorns in the global economy. So over to you, Chozian Wong, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes. Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and dear colleagues. I'm Wang Chaoxian from China Academy of Information and Communication Technology. And this is my colleague, Jiang Lin. We all specialize in digital economy policy research. Just experts from Ethiopia summarize the experiences of digital transformation in China. Yeah, that's very accurate. And I will focus on digital entrepreneurship in China from another perspective. So my presentation today contains two parts. First is the development of digital startups in China, and the other is the analysis of China's policies to promote digital startups. So let's start with the first one. In recent years, China's digital economy has been growing rapidly. According to our research, the scale of China's digital economy reached 5.4 trillion USD dollars in 2020, accounting for 39% of GDP, with an average compound annual growth rate of 14.8% from 2016 to 2020. The rapid expansion of China's digital economy not only stems from, but also stimulates high quality and high volume entrepreneurial activities. In China, the digital economy is the sector with the most intensive entrepreneurial activities and the fastest growth of startups. Although we have not developed a method to measure digital startups like the European Index of Digital Entrepreneurship Systems, but the development trend can be seen from the distribution of unicorns. According to China Unicorn Enterprise Report, released by Great Wall Strategy Consultants, a subsidiary of the Ministry of Science and Technology of the People's Republic of China, the number of unicorns in China has reached 251 in 2020, with more than 85% from digital economy and the rest from the innovative drugs, medical devices, and new energy. What's more, the digital economy unicorns are distributed in almost all sub-industries, such as digital entertainment, smart logistics, digital healthcare, artificial intelligence, new retail, e-commerce, industry, internet, and financial technology. So let's go to the second part. Analysis of China's policy to promote digital startups. There are complex economic and social reasons behind the rapid emergence and growth of digital startups in China. Although there are no policies directly focused on digital startups, China has a wealth of mass entrepreneurship and innovation policies that promote the entrepreneurial activities. For example, in the mass entrepreneurship and innovation policy database set up on Chinese government websites, there are more than 140 policies from 2015 to March 2022. The policy, including simplifying the approval process of starting a business, optimizing the business environment, supporting graduate entrepreneurship, building demonstration bases for entrepreneurship and innovation, and so on. All these policies have significantly improved the entrepreneurial environment in China. However, these policies can only explain the overall level of entrepreneurial activity in China and cannot explain why China's digital economy has seen the most active entrepreneurial activity in the past 10 years. I will share three views on this issue from a policy perspective. The first one is digital infrastructure policy, which aims to build an advanced and inclusive digital infrastructure and laying a solid foundation for digital entrepreneurship to flourish. Over the years, the Chinese government have continued to increase investment in digital infrastructure and introduced measures to continuously facilitate faster and more affordable internet connection, bring internet fees reduction by more than 95% for residents and 70% for enterprises between 2015 and 2020, benefiting more than 1 billion users annually and reducing internet fees by more than 111 billion USD in all. Besides, China is also continuing to promote universal service, with over 99% of Chinese administrative villages connected to fiber optics and 4G by 2021, significantly narrowed the digital divide between urban and rural areas. All these policies have made the internet accessible, useful, and affordable to almost everyone in China, which transforming China's huge population into digital users and creating a hyper-scale digital market. Relying on this advantage, entrepreneurs with good digital business model can quickly gain access to over 1 million or even over 100 million digital users. This is the fundamental reason why all digital startups, digital unicorns, and digital platforms in China can emerge and grow rapidly. The second is the support of digital platforms and related policies. digital platforms are one of the most important business transforms in the era of digital economy, changing the traditional business model and the way entrepreneurship is conducted. During the process of platform-supported entrepreneurship, once entrepreneurs have insight into opportunities, they can quickly obtain entrepreneurial resources such as traffic, data, algorithms, computing power, capital, and market provided by the platform. So the whole entrepreneurship process is more convenient and have a higher success rate. In general, a digital platform is a combination of digital entrepreneurial incubator and accelerate with rich entrepreneurial resources and efficient organization. In the first wave of digital development, with the support of China's platform economic policy and the joint efforts of all sectors of society, several large digital platforms have grown up, which have become important investors and enablers for startups today. According to China Unicorn Enterprise Development Report, platforms such as Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, Jingdong, Xiaomi, Meituan have invested in a total of 136 unicorns, accounting for 54% of all unicorns in China. In recent years, China has also been accelerating its efforts to build a more open and fairer competitive platform economy system in order to better facilitate the next round of the boom of digital entrepreneurship. The third is renewed digital entrepreneurial ecosystems policy. The most active places for digital entrepreneurship in China are distributed in 3 major regions. That is Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei region, the Yangtze River Delta region, and the Pearl River Delta region. The success of digital entrepreneurial ecosystems in these regions is not only supported by the factor such as local industry foundation, entrepreneurial culture, and human capital, but it is also a result of efficient interaction between government, digital platforms, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and other agents. Among all the factors, local government play a key role in the formation and development of digital entrepreneurial ecosystems. Beijing Zhongguancun, for example, was once a famous specialist market known for selling personal computers and other electronic goods decades ago. But today, it has become one of the most successful renewed digital entrepreneurial ecosystems in China, with more than 20,000 startups, including more than 200 incubators and accelerators, and 1/3 of Nasdaq-listed Chinese companies are located in Zhongguancun. The role of the government in the transformation of Zhongguancun cannot be ignored and can be divided into 3 categories. First, is the chief architect of the digital entrepreneurial ecosystem. In 2012, Zhongguancun was approved as a national independent innovation demonstration zone. Since then, the Zhongguancun Management Committee have issued a series of policies and measures to improve the entrepreneurial environment, gather entrepreneurial resources, build entrepreneurial platforms, guide entrepreneurial directions, and strengthen industry, university, and research cooperation. Second,
you have 2 more minutes, please.
The second is the public infrastructure provider. Zhongguancun commitment offered many infrastructures and services. The third is the startup market organized. The committee formulates the entry and exit criteria for the existence and organize various forms of activities to attract entrepreneurs, VCs, and other stakeholders to create a closely collaborative startup networks. After years of efforts, Zhongguancun was now become the ideal places for digital entrepreneurs. The digital economy is the most active area for entrepreneurship in China and a common entrepreneurial opportunity for developing countries around the world. In my opinion, digital entrepreneurship is more difficult than the traditional entrepreneurship until the digital infrastructure, digital platform, and digital entrepreneurship system are initially established. However, once these all elements have grown beyond a certain critical point through the effort of various parties, including policies, digital entrepreneurship will enter a self-reinforcement positive cycle and will show a more active and faster development trend than the traditional one. There are many more complex factors behind the boom digital entrepreneurship in China. However, with the time and knowledge limitation, my sharing today ends here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very detailed presentation on what policies have been put in place. And we see that it is not just policies with respect to digital startups which helped China's digital startups. It was also policies related to digital infrastructure, innovation, entrepreneurship. So in a way, both demand and supply side were addressed together so that digital ecosystem is set up for digital startups to become profitable. So with that, we come to the end of the panel discussion. Are there any questions from the floor? Please raise your flags if you have any question. I have one question over here. Okay, so very quickly, let me ask one question. Let me pose a question, and each panelist will be given 2 or 3 minutes to address, to give their answers. Now, the question is that in developing countries, the digital startups come up with solutions, digital solutions, and when these solutions become successful, they sell it to foreign digital platforms. And the country loses the successful digital innovation. So are there any policies in your countries where the government addresses this challenge of losing out on digital innovations which digital startups come up with? So let me go around the panelists in the same order. So Sachendra, do you have anything to say on that?
If I understood the question properly, in terms of the digital startup ecosystem, which is not, it's not secluded or it's not confined to a geography, it's part of the global ecosystem. What I think what the question is alluding to is exits of startups is a mechanism that an entrepreneurship grows. A serial entrepreneur would build the startup to a level where, if it's not something that he wants to run as a family business, would sell this to a bigger giant. That's why the global supply chains are there, and then start on the next startup itself. So looking at the global startup ecosystem, this is prevalent, and I would say that's how the global startup ecosystem works. And it's part and parcel of a growing economy. And especially in Sri Lanka, the largest exit recently was $15.5 million of a automation company, which almost 80% of the money came into the country through that exit, and that entrepreneurs started on their next startup. So serial entrepreneurship.
Thank you. Dr. Sohail?
Well, thank you very much. I think this is an extremely important question because the governments spend scarce resources in terms of public investment on these ventures, and if the fruit of their imagination, of course, that's their labor, but well, there is a social context to it, there is a public good context to it. We actually have many complaints in some national incubation centers that there are startups by younger people, and then there are some kind of agents is a harsh word, but people who know the international demand side, and they would offer apparently attractive monies to the startups who would be okay with that without realizing that how much actually they would be getting. And once we deliberated on that, it's a very difficult problem to put a kind of handle on. One has to go a long way. You see, on the one hand, the pull of the big market is there. And we are also seeing the emergence of global supply chains of services provision, which are very large in terms of entertainment, health, education, and the market is highly integrated. It's not like the goods market. Incidentally, we started very late in this market, but the market is terribly integrated, and with the modes of payment, you see, governments are at a loss to know what is happening. And these payments in fractions of dollars, let's say, by credit cards, there may be flight of capital. So there is a genuine global market of ideas. You can be very positive about it, but I think this is the unique history of the sector. You see the moratorium that was put 20 years before on the duties in terms of IT products. This is an independent big topic, but I personally think that the countries should be mindful of developing national communication borders, and the ideas, even if the ideas have to go, you see, this is like patents discussion in the old days. There should be some system, and the original author should continue getting something out of an idea which makes big in the hands of merchandisers, you can say, or the people who commercialize those ideas. But there has to be an awareness given to the young startups about the management and entrepreneurship aspects. You see, I'm happy that our Chinese colleague has talked a lot about this aspect also. It's not only creativity and imagination, it does involve entrepreneurship, and management is important, and governments need to do more to avoid or save. This is a kind of an exploitation which happens.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail. Esther?
Yeah, thank you. Related to the supporting policy to develop the digital startup and digital innovation in Indonesia, we see that the most important factor to develop the digital startup in Indonesia is capital. So we develop financial technology in Indonesia. Yeah, so the Indonesian government support the equity crowdfunding. So the startup can also collect fund from the equity crowdfunding, or maybe from venture capital. As we know that one of the biggest bank, the Indonesian bank, they support digital startup via venture capital. That's the first. And then the second, as we know that if we talk about startups in Indonesia, not only we talk about the e-commerce platform, but the Indonesian government encourage more startups. The Indonesian government has a target 1 million startups in Indonesia. So they give more incentive, as I mentioned earlier on my presentation slide, that not only fiscal incentive, but also non-fiscal incentive. For example, they also support on how to provide training skills for ICT workers and laborers, and also they give more the develop the infrastructure. As we know that there is prevalent digital divide, especially infrastructure in Indonesia.
Thank you, Esther. Can we now go to Tige?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a very relevant issue for future. As I said, in Ethiopia, we are in a very early stage in digital startups, and I'm not aware of any capital flight or anything. And I think the key issue really should be, it's okay if foreigners invest in it in the country in the form of FDI. The challenge would be if they are taking it away. So definitely it's very important to have to consider sort of capital flight laws, and also encouraging the domestic capacity and stuff like that. It's very important to think about it, but at the moment the Ethiopian policy is very conservative. There is restrictions on which foreigners can engage, on which FDI can engage. So at the moment the main focus of government is FDI is on sort of manufacturing, textile, laser, and stuff like that, but they're inside the country, which is okay. And also there are strict rules about capital flight. So in terms of startup, definitely it's something that policymakers need to think about to sort of ensure the domestic capacity.
Thank you very much. Chosen?
Yeah. On this topic, my colleague Jiang Ying, she has done some research on that. So, Chair, I'd like to ask my colleague Jiang Ying to answer this question. Is that acceptable?
Is she with you? Then please.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Besides
We can't hear her, please.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Besides the factors that my colleague has mentioned in the presentation, such as the policies in the infrastructure, the
Platforms.
the digital platforms, and the regional
And the
the entrepreneurial ecosystem. There are some other policies that China support the startups, the digital startups. The first one is the digital skill. As the digital tech talent has been a very important factor in this in the digital era. There are many other factors. There are many other policies to encourage digital talent to join the startup, to join the digital startups, and the other one is the application of digital technology in the traditional industries such as the manufacturing industry, especially for the SMEs. And besides, Chinese policies have also provided the digital economy startups with financial, technology, capital, and talent, fiscal and taxation support. And in the recent years, various provinces and cities in China has established digital economy parks which have innovation-oriented and provide a good development environment for digital economy startups by creating a digital environment and creating a digital ecosystem for the industries who want to join the digital transforming wave. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. One thing which was pointed out in Josian's presentation, which actually answers this question, was he said that in China, the national big digital platforms invest a lot in digital startups. I think that could be a very good solution and very good way forward to encourage your big firms and your national platforms to invest in digital startups so that the digital solutions which are successful remain inside the country and benefit the economy, the national economies, and are not really sold off to the big platforms outside the country, so that whatever you are investing, you also reap the gains of your investments. So with that, I think we have come to the concluding session of this two-day meeting. Let me conclude by thanking all the panelists who have traveled in these trying times to be here. They were caught in snowstorm, they lost their luggage, but they still made it over here. So thank you very much, all of you who have traveled from so far to be here in person. And thank you to the panelists who have joined virtually, because I think that is also a very big challenge to join virtually a hybrid meeting. We know how challenging it was to organize one. So for you people also, it must have been very challenging. And special thanks to the audience for their very engaging participation in the past 2 days. And let me take this opportunity to thank the project team for their untiring efforts to make this project a meaningful success for all developing countries. So a big applause to all of you. Can I request all of you to come on the dais so that we can have one photograph to remember the first meeting that we had in person, hopefully post-pandemic. Thank you, and the meeting is concluded. Thank you.
Thank you.